Hello and welcome to BQ Prime. You're watching Earnings with BQ, and my guest today is Satish Pai, MD and CEO of Hindalco. Hindalco came out with a good set of numbers which beat street estimates, but there are concerns on macroeconomic headwinds. And to talk about that, I have Mr. Pai joining me. Satish, can you start off with the good set of numbers? But what I saw from your presentation was that there is a mutedness in the consumption pattern for aluminum and other for aluminum specifically. Can you take us through how it's doing for globally and domestically?
Yeah, I think that, let's start with the good news. The domestically, the demand for aluminum is extremely strong. I mean, if you look at Q4, the demand was up by nearly 10% compared to Q4 of last year. So all sectors in India and the Indian economy means that both aluminum and copper demand in India is strong. Now let's go globally. I think globally, if you look at the main segments we operate, aerospace and auto demand is very strong and we think will continue. We have had some weaknesses in the can because of the destocking impact that we talked about. That destocking should be over largely in Q4 and some residual impact going into Q1. And we think that the can demand should be back by the second half of this year. The building and construction got impacted by the when the US interest rates started to go up. Housing starts in the US started to go down. Now, as interest rate hikes, people think have reached the sort of peak. Housing starts have started to go up for the last few months. So hence, we are also thinking that the building and construction demand in the second half of this year should come back. So that's a little bit of the worldwide demand situation.
How do you see the pricing environment? Do you see it stabilizing at current level, or you see some kind of sluggishness coming in there? Because China, though China is opened up, there is some kind of consumption happening. But there is in the last quarter, I think we saw some kind of consumption drop in China as well, right?
Yeah, I think, see, first, Q1 in China is traditionally a low consumption quarter because they have the Chinese New Year. But I think that people, it would be fair to say, are still a little bit worried about how strong the Chinese economy is really doing. So I think that is what's keeping prices of commodities at the lower end. So if you look at today's LME price of 2200 to 2300, for me, that is actually at the lower end. In fact, if the Chinese economy does well, and because supply and demand is quite tight, you will see an upside in the LME once the economic situation gets clear.
Do you have a timeline? When do you see this pickup in prices coming up?
I think we will get to know in the coming months how the Chinese economy is doing, because you will see it in the consumption pattern of commodities, oil, all that, and then things will get clearer.
Do you see the global environment, which is primarily in the US, with respect to recessionary trend, which is coming from there? In the Europe, consumption has fallen because of various factors, energy, war, and others, impacting in a big way how you see to FY24 to pan out?
So most of the bad news in Europe is already factored in, and in fact, an interesting data point is that energy prices today in Europe have reached the pre-war levels. So costs in the energy side has come down. So I think the US economy, people are a little bit worried, but there is quite a lot of people who are still very optimistic that in the second half of this year, the US economy will do well. So I think overall, when I look at the macroeconomic uncertainties for our business, which is aluminum and copper, the strength of the Chinese economy is the thing that worries me. I'm not so worried about Europe and US.
And you see Chinese coming up maybe second half of the year.
I think it's more than coming up. I think we will get clarity when some real data comes out.
Copper has done very well for you in this quarter. Take us through how you see the pricing and volume environment for copper.
I think copper, we are doing steadily a 500 plus crores of EBITDA every quarter. We think that trend is going to continue because demand for copper is very strong. We now have, after the acquisition of Riker, nearly 420, 430 KT of rod capacity. So for us, from a supply demand point of view, we are doing very well in copper. The
Mhm.
only point I wanted to make is in Q1, we have a shutdown, a large shutdown of 65 days. So Q1 EBITDA for copper business will come down a bit, but Q2, Q3, Q4 will all be 500 plus.
Okay. Could have been what could be the impact of the shutdown 65 days
We'll be
scheduled
roughly
shutdown?
around 350 to 400.
Will you be able to make it up in the next 3 quarters?
I mean, we will try to make it up as much as we can, but I think that, we'll have to see.
So, from volume and value wise, you hope to make it up, right? The environment for demand and consumption environment for copper is
Is
much better as we speak, as against aluminum. Is that a fair say?
No, really, both. If I take the Indian market, the demand for both aluminium and copper both is 10% plus. So demand on both sides is strong. I think the advantage in copper is that we are well positioned to be the only copper producer in the country today, and hence, we can take better advantage of market conditions. But demand for both aluminium and copper in India is equally strong.
Mm-hmm. Uh, Take us through how Novelis has done in this quarter. I mean, I saw the revenues were almost flat on a year-to-year basis there for Novelis. So, is there a pressure coming in because the beverages segment is seeing a destocking which is happening because of that?
Yeah, I think that year on year it looks flat, but you have to see Q3 was really the low point for Novelis, and I think that compared to if you look at it sequentially, Novelis has climbed back up in Q4, and I think the big point for us is that now every quarter onwards, Novelis the volumes have to start to pick up because you see Novelis in Q4 shipped 936 KT.
Yeah.
The real capacity of Novelis is a million tons a quarter. So that is where once the can destocking gets over, the can volumes will pick up. Building and construction volume should start to pick up. So once Novelis gets to the 970, 980 KT per quarter, then the EBITDA per ton also should get back to the $500 per ton level.
Do you see the demand from aerospace going back to that high level, or is it just a pickup which you're seeing in terms of demand from OEMs? We've seen a lot of orders being placed to Boeing and Airbus, but is that orders translating into future orders for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we are flat out. We have any ton that we can ship to aerospace, we are shipping. So we are like, full capacity. In fact, aerospace, it's a small volume, but we shipped about 28 KT this quarter. So we are already at nearly the, 100 plus KT run rate. So it has already translated. We are flat out in aerospace. We don't have any space anymore.
How is the capex going through in Novelis? You had what $3.3 billion of project underway or it's been done. How much of it's been done and how much is left?
No, the 3.3 billion is under implementation. So we have guided that FY24 Novelis will be a $1.8 billion capex, and the Hindalco business in India will be 5,000 crores. So pretty large capex programs that are ongoing now.
Because I think, if I'm not wrong, you have said 1.13 billion total capex for domestic. So it's spread over 2 to 3 years. Is that the range?
2 years, because you see, already this year is 5,000 crores. Next year will also be a similar level. So we have Chakala mine and the downstream project. These are the two large ones in that 1.13 billion. So it'll be the next 2 years will be the heavy capex part.
We've seen your net debt coming down significantly in this quarter, primarily led by higher cash from operations. How do you plan to fund these capex which you have planned out?
So our guidance is very clear. We do capex with cash generated. So we have our debt. We are not going to borrow any more extra debt, and basically we'll be doing all these capex, both Novelis and Hindalco, with the cash that we generate.
So it will be internal cash accruals entirely which will
Yes.
be there.
Yes.
So your debt levels on a gross level, which is currently at 58 or 1,000 crores, are they going to remain at the same levels, or
They will remain at the same level. Yes.
they will be you won't be looking at pairing it or
No, because we need the cash to do the capex now.
okay. Overall, finally, Satish, we've seen volatility in prices going into FY24. What is the kind of volume and production jump growth that you're projecting?
No, you see, from a volume point of view, we are in India, we are at full capacity. And Novelis, I think I told you their capacity is 1 million tons a quarter, and they are at the 930. So they have to get back to their full capacity. So we are, in India, we are flat out. All capacity is being utilized.
And is there a expectation of how the consumption is going to go up? Because India, you said double digit 10% growth, but globally, we have seen some weakness in Q1 coming in, or calendar year Q1 we have seen that weakness coming in. How do you see Q2, Q3, Q4 panning out as far as consumption is concerned? And
So consumption
is there a headwind that you see in going into FY24?
The only headwind is the Chinese demand. If I simplify, half the product consumption in the world happens in China in aluminium and copper. So the only headwind I see is the strength of the Chinese economy.
Satish, it was a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you very much for joining us on BQ Prime.
Thank you.